Give the call to Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Thank you so much, Senator Ayres. I haven't had a chuckle like that for a while, and to be honest, the fact that you could deliver that with a straight face was really quite extraordinary. So this week and last week I've responded to some pretty ridiculous accusations from Labor. Labor has consistently made claims about the Morrison government that are not only blatantly hypocritical, they are blatantly false, and as like we just heard from Senator Ayres, it's sometimes even a little bit entertaining. But the absolute gall demonstrated by Labor in this parliament today is as unprecedented as the times we now face as a country. The bumbling, stumbling, inadequately woeful opposition whose handling of this crisis in Labor-led states is destroying businesses and is directly contributing to job losses. Now, we know Labor is not about job creation. They're not about the private sector. They're all about making sure that the socialist left within their party are being looked after, the magic pudding that somehow will just keep giving and giving and giving. Not about supporting workers, not about supporting economic growth and job creation. But yet all they can do is accuse the Morrison government of not doing enough to maintain jobs in this country. They should be ashamed of themselves supporting strategies that not supporting strategies that support Australian workers. No wonder even the unions are walking away from Labor. And Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, why wouldn't Labor be getting desperate? Why wouldn't they want to distract the Australian public from their mishandling of this crisis under pressure? It takes real leadership to prevail. So they want to talk about jobs. Awesome. Let's talk about jobs. There have been no relaxation of restrictions in Queensland where tourism and hospitality businesses are going to the wall. Now, I probably should make sure that I do cover off that restrictions are being relaxed in Queensland if you're a footballer. Restrictions are relaxed if you're Danny Minogue or a celebrity. And restrictions are relaxed if you're working on some TV show that's currently a hotspot, or you're Eddie Maguire. Of course they're relaxed because, we know Labor love to suck up to their celebrities as much as they possibly can. So, of course, we're talking about everyday Australians. We're talking about for people that live on the New South Wales border that are so deeply impacted by these restrictions. The fact that 80% of tourism to the Gold Coast is generated from Victoria and New South Wales, yet Premier Palaszczuk, in a bid to protect her own job, is destroying the jobs of all of those hospitality and tourism workers on the Gold Coast. So let's have a look at some of the other figures, because perhaps they're not fully understood by those opposite. So tourism and hospitality, it actually drives and is one of the most labour-intensive sectors and therefore creates more jobs. Again, guys, for your benefit, it creates more jobs in the private sector, more than any other sector, for every dollar spent. And so what happened in April of this year when it comes to overnight spending? How much money was spent in the hospitality and tourism sector in April 2020 compared to April 2019? We saw that the spend was 91% down. Only 9% of the previous year, what was spent in April, occurred in 2020. Now, as we started to see restrictions relax, things did improve a little bit. Things came back ever so slightly, but so that they were only down in May 82%. But then we get Premier Palaszczuk, who's now blocked it all off and shutting down this industry and absolutely refusing to support what would have been considered probably a pretty big part of the economy in Queensland, I would have thought. The whole expression, beautiful one day, perfect the next, whereas it's beautiful one day, paradise lost the next. Certainly for all those small business owners in the tourism and hospitality sectors. So The issue is also not just for those in the tourism and hospitality sector. It's not just the hotels and it's not just the restaurants. Tourism sector is bigger than that. It's also about the travel agents, the petrol stations, the road houses. It's also about the shops in airports and all of those businesses that are so desperately impacted by the closure of the hospitality and tourism industry. But so why is it? Why would these restrictions be so tight? In areas where there are no COVID infections, some businesses are closed, some are boarded up, workers are at home, and as each week passes, they are less likely to have a job to return to. We should be all working together to ensure that our nation is able to stop the virus and maintain jobs. I realise that might be like walking and chewing gum for the opposite side, something they're probably not looking at one of their top 10 skill sets, but it'd be worth giving it a go at some point. But of course, the best that Labor premiers can do is stubbornly maintain a series of poor positions purely designed for political gain, definitely not about preserving jobs. And in that dictatorship of the Republic of Palaszczuk, she won't even let the sick and dying go to her hospitals, hospitals for Queenslanders. Wonder if she's thinking about giving any of that federal money that's been spent on those hospitals that are for all Australians. But of course she would prefer to see the death of an unborn twin that possibly risk her career. What chance do the tourism operators have, the hotels, the restaurants, the bars and the store owners and other businesses now have in this great tourism state? Businesses along the coast and in regional areas, zero trade. No tourists, no business, no jobs to return to. But now we learn that she's even refusing to talk to the New South Wales Premier. And I will come to Premier Dan Andrews and what's happening in Victoria and why ultimately I think the second wave there is fundamentally responsible for a big drop in our economic downturn. But, you know, Anastasia Palaszczuk is not going to let Dan outdo her. Premier Andrews is working constructively with Premier Berejiklian, increasing the exclusion zone around the borders, ensuring that health treatment's accessible and ensuring that teachers and kids at school who live 2 or 3 k's from a border are able to cross over and attend school and participate in a learning environment. Not our friend Anastasia, won't even talk to the Premier of New South Wales. A little bit frightening considering you consider the success that New South Wales is having when it's looking at contact tracing. Be a pretty good idea, I would say, for Premier Palaszczuk to pick up the phone to Gladys. But I will come back to Victoria, and it is Premier Andrews who's certainly doing his best to emanate mousy tongue at the moment, handling of this pandemic that's costing our nation billions every week and putting the future and likelihood of its workers on the line. So competent leaders don't just manage the pandemic. It's a delicate balancing act requiring intelligent and measured decision-making. Decision-making needs to be focused on problem areas that they occur so that Australian lives and jobs are protected. So Premier Andrews failed to focus on the importance when quarantining Australians returning from overseas in a hotel in Melbourne, and sadly poor management and poor leadership has cost Victoria a great deal. The number of lives that have been lost is now tragically documented daily. The lack of measured focus has cost Victorians a great deal, and in fact today I've been contacted by the Restaurants and Catering Association, incredibly concerned with the restrictions that the Victorian government is seeking to impose on businesses there. I mean, the discussion around allowing only outdoor dining. I mean, Premier Andrews, come on, it's Melbourne. You don't quite have the harbour of Sydney nor the fabulous weather. Who's going to want to sit outside? You are destroying business, Premier Andrews, and you need to apologise for Victorians for the way that you have handled this. There's a word called sorry. You might want to use it at some point. Labor's destroying jobs in the country. They're mishandling the health crisis we now face, and they should not be suggesting that this government's failing to protect Australians. Caring about Australians should come first. Australian businesses and jobs have taken absolute precedence under our incredibly competent leaders, Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Treasurer Joff Frydenberg. And both of them are doing their utmost to rebuild our economy while working in tandem with our incredibly competent and steady Health Minister Greg Hunt, as he works to bring COVID patient numbers under control and save Australian lives. Thank God for their leadership to counteract the incompetence of Labor's state performers who are now directly contributing to the decline of jobs in this